What's up, guys? Welcome to Valley Vibes. Today I got a special guest, Michael Menchaca. How's it going, man?
It's going good, man. It's going good. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to getting into it today.
Absolutely. The reason I asked you on is because I've been dealing with a lot of strange things going into my older age. I just turned 43, right? And I'm always posting stuff online, and sometimes you'll chime in and stuff like that. So I always respect, obviously, your advice and your insight on everything. So it's very important for me to go the rest of my life because I feel, and I could be wrong, that have less sundowns and those days and nights.
Yeah.
I have less of them in the future than I did in the past. I could be completely wrong, right? I don't know how long I'm gonna live. I could live as long as my grandfather, which is 95 now.
Mm.
So it's
Bodes
it's
well
just
for
a
you.
weird time, it's a weird, and you come to certain things in your life where you start questioning certain things. You start questioning your mortality. So it's an interesting thing. But the first thing I wanted to talk about with you, to actually introduce yourself, let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Michael Menchaca. I'm a board certified family nurse practitioner. I've been in practice now for 8 years, and I founded what was originally Menchaca Family Clinic in 2017, and then we rebranded as Amenity Direct Care in 2018. And we've been steadily growing. One of the Valley's first direct primary care practices. I'd argue probably the first, although the timeline gets a little fuzzy. And we've actually grown it to be quite large. The 17% of direct care practices across the country usually top out at around 350 members. Right now, we're looking at just over 1,000, and
Nice.
it's been really great, not just boasting the numbers, but we've been having a really great impact on the members that we service. We've been able to change lives. We've been able to make early detection on cancers and save people's lives in that sense, but also just kind of reversing a lot of the common metabolic conditions that we see in the valley, helping people with their weight loss, and doing so in a sustainable way, both financially, but also, from for their own lifestyle. And it's been really rewarding, and the members have been super appreciative. Like, I've never had more gratitude from patients than we do right now, which is
Yeah.
which is
You,
awesome.
you know what's interesting about that too is I've been hearing a ton of people complain on social media about the doctor wait times. And I asked this the other day. It's like, should you be allowed to? I forget how I phrase it, but like the wait times are just too long in doctors regular off traditional, right? So kind of
Yeah.
touch on what you do with direct care.
Yeah. So, I guess kind of one of the overarching models of direct care and how it differs from traditional healthcare is that we the number one goal is to not overburden the doctor or the nurse practitioner or the PA, right? So for example, like in traditional healthcare, one doc may have like 1,500 patients to their panel, right? All the way up to like 3,000.
Wow.
And in direct care, usually it caps at about 500 to 600. Some people cap at 400. All just depends on, the acuity of the patients, meaning like how sick are these people really? How much attention do they need? How much care do they need? And then what the comfort level and the practice level is, and the efficiency level of the clinician in hand. And so when we take that focus of limiting how many people are going to be assigned to one particular clinician, it opens up a lot of flexibility, especially once you on top of that remove the middlemen, which is the insurance companies. You don't have to worry about all that. You shorten the distance between patient and clinician, which allows for a better relationship, and then allows for better scheduling, right? So like at our practice, we are an appointment only clinic, but we guarantee same day next day appointments, right? So we don't have to do a walk-in because there's always time available, and those same day next day appointments are intended for the person that needs to go to the emergency room, or the person that would otherwise have to go to the urgent care. And so when those needs don't come up, then we have a lot of time. So it's like, hey, you come in for your 10 a.m. It's 10:01. We're walking to your room. We're not walking to your room at noon.
All
And the reason that happens a lot in traditional care is, one, you have the 1,500 to one versus the 500 to one, but then also because it is a fee for service, usually a keep what you kill model, meaning like you'll make the amount, or you'll make more as you see more. you know a time slot then becomes very valuable for a clinician. And in today's day and age, there's no room for missing out on a time slot. So you know what the strategy is? It's let's put two people at 10:15 and we'll put three people at 10:30. And that way,
Hmm.
if two people don't show, the time slot still gets seen. We still see somebody, we still generate revenue, right?
I got you.
Uh,
Okay.
and I that kind of ideology is why I say that like a lot of times it's just dollars. Like that's what's really driving the healthcare system is dollars and yeah, I mean just that
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. One of the things I've been scratching my head on for years is because I started my whole workout journey and eating right and my health conscious lifestyle 2.5 years ago. I think I just celebrated 2.5 years ago. And it's been a tough journey. I get why people give up. So it's just so damn hard. It's tedious. You got to do the same crap every day. And in my case, I'm lifting weights. You got to lift heavier weights and you cannot stop. It's like you got to keep showing up over and over and over again. And when I lost a bunch of weight, I was at 250. I went down to 186, and I felt really healthy. I felt strong, and I started gaining weight to get up to 200. So that's about where I'm at right now. But when I did that, I was kind of like, well, I was telling people, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I found out real fast that people don't like to be told what to do. So instead, I came to the conclusions like, well, you have to inspire people for them to make change. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I think before I even dive into that particular question, I'll take just a quick moment to commend you on the changes that you've made. I've seen it, I followed it, and I just get really excited seeing people from the valley like make those changes for themselves, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of benefit from it, right?
Absolutely. Health, number one.
Yeah, and everything just kind of stems from there. And in terms of like, when it comes to like, what was the particular question again? That do you have to motivate people or inspire people to make the
Yeah,
change?
so I thought that I came to the point where it's like I'm telling people, I'm telling people, I'm telling people, and then I figured out real fast that you have to inspire them first for them to get
Yeah.
that motivation, and then they can possibly do it.
Yeah, and so like anytime that you're talking about making an actual lifestyle change for your health, it has to come. You have to get to an individual's why they want to do it. It has to be something bigger than themselves. It can be related to themselves, but it can't just be anything about vanity. It can't be anything about waist sizes or a physical appearance. It has to be like deep rooted why. You have to figure that out with them or help them figure that out. Once you get there, then you can start working on lifestyle changes to improve their health. What I've found in my experience is that there's no one approach that works for everybody, and everything needs to be kind of tailored to the own individual's needs, right? And like if you kind of open up the book here, it's like one person might define their health as being maybe 5 pounds overweight with not so much muscle. Another person might define their health as like being very lean and ripped. Some other people might define it as being marathon runners, and as you can imagine, like not only the nutrition, but the exercise routines would be different for those three people,
Yeah.
right? And I think what happens a lot on social is you get a like a particular way of doing things, right? Like keto, right? And then it's like you have to do keto, you have to do keto, you have to do keto, and it's like keto is a tool that may be good for a lot of people, but maybe doesn't fit with some people. And kind of figuring out how to tailor that to the own individual's why, I think that's how you can inspire the change and then make it a sustainable change, right? Because we're not looking for an 8-week transformation. We're looking at changing the lifestyle so that the benefits extend on into your later years. One of my favorite ways to kind of phrase that up in a single sentence is we want to add years to your life, but we also want to add life to your years, right?
Yeah.
So over the past couple of years, as life expectancy has gone up, it sounds nice, but then how are those ending years being spent? And if you look at the hospice industry, it has boomed. I think it's $1 trillion industry or $1 billion industry now, and it's because the end of life, those last years, people are not, you know, what you see on the media graphics, where they're smiling, taking a hike, and boarding a plane. Like, no, they're usually dragging around oxygen tanks, or they have a bag full of meds, or maybe they're confined to a bed, or stuff like that. And I think a lot of people in our generation um, are coming to an awareness of that and kind of trying to make those changes to not end up in a similar situation.
Yeah, the quality of your life, I think, is the most important because when I first got into this, I told my trainers, like, I'm only interested in vanity. And then the only thing that came out of it was the health. I was like, okay, this is good too. So then I was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, the great thing is I can play with my kids. I have so much energy now. And there's a huge difference because I talk to my trainer all the time about trying testosterone or getting some injections or something like that. And he's like, I wouldn't recommend it for you because you're 43. Look at people your age. Like, I think you're doing pretty good. And I think I just kind of give myself a hard time sometimes because sometimes I do get tired. I get overburdened. I get tired. I get lethargic. There's things that I want to stay in bed sometimes, but I get my ass out of bed and I just go and do what I got to do. Right. So I don't know if it's just giving myself a hard time about it. I'm at the age because I do look back and I see, yeah, I'm 40. I'm in my 40s. I'm doing pretty good compared to the other people. What do you think about that?
Uh, you know, I think your trainer made a good point. I think you make a good point. Um, what I hear when you're speaking on it, what I hear is like, yeah, this is a very individual decision, right? And again, it goes back to defining what things actually mean to you. And so, like, if you are searching for optimal performance, yes, testosterone could get you there, right? There's pros, there's cons. I think the bigger question is like, why is the testosterone low though, right? And can we do something there to fix it? And there's a lot that goes into the whole idea, like, why are testosterone levels lower than ever now? Why do some men experience it earlier than others? What is the impact of stress on testosterone? um, what is the impact of diet on testosterone? What is the impact of um, protein and exercising on testosterone? All those things. And then what are you using to measure yourself, right? Like, what's the barometer? If it's other
Right.
people, then I mean, you're killing the game, bro. There's no need, right? But if it's yourself and you want to see, then you can have that conversation. And um, I've actually changed my mind on testosterone replacement therapy over the past 2 years. I used to kind of be in the camp that was like, no, you don't need it. It's dangerous. It's not safe. This, and that, heart disease, blah, 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 blah. Um, but then, more and more studies kept coming out, kept coming out, kept coming out, kept coming out, showing like safety basically. And one of my favorite studies was actually released last year, and this was the last study that really turned the corner for me. They took, I believe it was 2,400 men, and they gave 1,200 of those men placebo and 1,200 testosterone. The interesting part here is that all 2,400 men already had established heart disease, meaning they had previous stents placed, they had had a previous heart attack, or even a previous stroke. Um, and they gave half of them nothing or placebo, and they gave half testosterone. And then over a 2-year period, the group that had the worst cardiac health was the one that didn't get testosterone, right?
Hmm.
So the group that did get testosterone had less trips to the hospital, less complications from their therapy, from their chronic disease, things like that. And the two endpoints of the study were is testosterone safe when monitored, and does it worsen heart disease? And it was, yes, it's safe when monitored, and no, it doesn't worsen heart disease, right? And so that was like, oh, okay. And my family line is just like littered with heart problems, so that's why it was such a
Yeah.
big thing for me. Um, and so, and then, whenever we have our pet members that come in and they're interested, we talk about it, and we make a very individual decision. Some folks look to supplement, some people look to use actual testosterone replacement therapy. And then some folks, we look at like, okay, well, what are you eating? Right. And it's like, if you're making 4 trips to Whataburger every day, your testosterone's not going to be optimized. If you're high strung, stressed out all the time, which most of us are, and we don't even realize it, that's going to drop your testosterone levels. If you're not working out, that's going to drop your testosterone levels. So there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because the older you get, like you kind of have to optimize your entire life, and I feel like it's a daunting task. Like it's adding more stress because now you got to do this, and you got to do this on top of the family stuff, and then you got to do this on top of your work stuff. So that just adds to the stress of life. And I think we were talking about anxiety on one of my posts, and you were talking about who was you mentioned somebody, what was his name?
Probably Dr. Mate, Gabriel Mate.
Yes, yes, there you go. So anxiety, I had never experienced anxiety until I turned 41, and I was driving in my car, and so I drive a Tesla, right? And the
Mhm.
Tesla just stopped working. So I was stuck inside the vehicle. It didn't never dawned on me that I have the emergency latch, right? But in
Mm,
that state of panic, I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm in my car. I'm sweating. It's getting hot. It just started getting really hot. Obviously, in South Texas, it gets super hot. So I started
mhm,
getting like super anxious. And then it finally dawned on me, okay, I opened the latch, right? 2 weeks later, I was driving to work out. It was so hot outside. Uh, I had to open the door when I got to a stoplight because I started getting anxious. Like I felt like I wouldn't be able to get out of my car again. So opening the
mm,
door again, just it obviously alleviated that stress, right, and anxiety. But then I also got two more episodes of anxiety, maybe like a month and a half later. And now when I start to feel that, I kind of just switch my mind. I turn it off and I think about something else immediately. So that I kind of wanted to touch on anxiety because I had never experienced that before. I know a ton of my friends deal with it. I know a ton of people deal with it. Some people they've never had the experience, which is amazing. Thank them for not ever having it. But it's a horrible thing. I had never experienced that, and I first felt that in my 40s. What can you say about that? What insight can you give me about that?
um, yeah, so it's a large topic.
Yeah.
The I think if we just start out kind of where does anxiety stem from? And as Dr. Mate would say, it's usually a combination of genetic, environmental, and psychological factors, along with chronic stress, and then along with how were you brought up, what kind of childhood trauma do you have. And I don't say childhood trauma as in like something bad had to have happened to you, but sometimes something like not such a big deal happens, but your 4-year-old self thinks it's the end of the world, and you that can stick with you to along your way of life. And then you hit a particular year that just happens to be a heavy burden, and you can get that breakthrough anxiety, and it's like, whoa, I've never felt that before. And I really changed the way I look at anxiety as well. After having done a lot of my own self work, um, I see anxiety now as a life experience, totally normal life experience. If it becomes sustained anxiety, then that's when we have a problem. If it's affecting work, if it's affecting social relationships, if it's affecting parental relationships, or even marriage relationships, then that is where, like, okay, let's intervene. Let's start looking at this. Um, and everybody experiences that on different levels.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting thing because I was reading about Dr. Mate, and he was talking about like, the addiction, the child development, the stress and health and stuff like that. And I
Mhm.
do. I actually looking through a lot of that stuff. I was like, I do deal with quite a few of that stuff, like society, like the way you're supposed to be looked at society, and specifically like social media. Like I have an addiction to social media. I've realized this because I was talking to somebody yesterday. I was like, I was posting stuff, I getting a lot of engagement, and it kind of gives you that little dopamine hit, and you want to keep doing it and doing it. And then yesterday, I was
Mhm.
just so damn tired. I was like, I don't even want to deal with people. Like, I don't want to post anything. I just want to. So I see myself getting that addiction. Like, it's a weird thing because I can see it. I notice it, and I can kind of move away from it too. But at the same time, it's like this is what I do for a living, right? So I gotta be
Yeah.
out there because the societal standards of me showing up every day, going into work and doing regardless of what I say, regardless of how I feel. I'm gonna show up every single day. I see those pressures. Like I
Yeah. Yeah.
see
Yeah.
them, and I just don't know. I don't know how to deal with them sometimes because sometimes I don't know how to detach.
Mm. Yeah. That's actually a really great point, and just kind of tying uh, Dr. Mate into social media. I think it's like, um, kind of going full circle here. Like when things happen to you as a kid, you develop certain coping mechanisms, and it seems as though life in America and society in America kind of funnels all of that into a certain group of core coping mechanisms that allow you to survive your childhood, so to speak, and end up leading you to become who you are. And it's a little bit different for everybody. But what's interesting is that sometimes a lot of those coping mechanisms have been deemed socially admirable, just like your business being on Facebook is socially admirable. Sharing content is socially admirable. There's trust that becomes there, but to a certain there comes a point where they no longer help you and they become your ceiling, and then you have to learn how to get away from that and break that to go to the next level. And the social media is a great example because it's almost like you're everybody on social is like portraying the best parts of themselves and then having
Right.
to come back into reality, which is like not the greatest recipe to avoid anxiety and depression, right? um but yeah, it's such a large like topic to wrap up into a few sentences, but it's it's a vicious cycle, society, and maintaining the perception that we need to maintain both for business and social relationships, and even just relationships among family and friends, right? Because you see other people, you see all the best parts of their lives, and so then you're like, well, why isn't my life that great? And like, I'm like, let me post all the best parts of my life, and then somebody's looking at your page doing the same thing, and it just keeps
Yeah.
on going and going and going, right? And that comes from like I can tell you, for me, it comes from my desire to want to feel good enough, right? And my desire to want people to like me and to please people, right? Because those are some of the things that I started to rely on as a kid that kept going and going and going and going. Um, what are your thoughts on that take?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because yeah, I do feel like and I always talk about this too, is like you are out in the public and you do care about what people think. And then I get people that always comments like, I don't care what people think. I'm my own person. I'm gonna do whatever I want, whatever. But at the end of the day, it is true because you do really care about what people think because you do want to be in a group of like-minded people. You do want to go out into community and you want to be able to shake hands, have a smile, and go out in the community because you do want people to like you. Like I think that is at the root of everything that you do in society because you're part of a community. You want to be in the community and you want to be a person that gives back to the community, right? So I feel like a lot of people are just full of shit when they say that. Like I don't care what people think. Truth is, I think people do care, like a lot more than they say they do, right? So I do feel it. Like it's a stressful thing, but also I find myself I can't detach. Like that's the hard part. So I always got to play this part when I'm out in public. I play this part on social media. But I mean at the same time it is a genuine me. Like whatever you hear here these conversations, I'm probably going to have out in public with anybody. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think kind of like, you talked about it a bit ago when you were like, when you started to feel it, you like immediately start thinking about something else. And that is the common reaction is like when you get those uncomfortable feelings, you want to put them away, right? You don't want to feel them, stay away. And we learn that from childhood. And if you think back, I'm sure you were told, and I know I do this to my own daughter, even though I try not to, but she cries and I'm like, hey, stop crying, stop crying. There's no
yeah,
need to cry for that. It's not a big deal, and that's just communicating to them like, oh, these feelings I need to push away, right? And so then when these uncomfortable feelings come through in adulthood, we repress them, right? And we push them down. And I was actually watching a reel on Instagram, and Dr. Monte was like, what's the term for pushing something down? And it's like it's depress, right? It's a depression, right? And so I, even before coming along to learning about Dr. Mate, it was very clear to see after talking to so many people over the past 8 years that like a lot of this comes from just unresolved emotions that people harbor that they don't want to experience because they're uncomfortable. And so one of my philosophy now, what I try to teach to our members is like you should actually take some time to journal what you're feeling, right? And that can sound intimidating, like I gotta get a journal. Like, no man, like all you gotta do is turn on your video or your memo recorder on your iPhone and just talk about what you're feeling, talk about what you're thinking, just get it out, take it out and get it out from there, from inside your body, because it,
yeah,
it builds up like pressure until you lash out one day. And that
yeah.
lash out might mean in frustration and irritability, in tears, in an anxiety attack, things like that. So there's something really, really interesting about specifically pen and paper, I would say. And Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about this, where he, if you're just in your thoughts, there's so much going on at the same time that it's a complete mess. But in order to write a sentence, you have to organize that mess into a single sentence. And when you organize a thought, it's easier to process, it's easier to comprehend, it's easier to deal with. And then it just becomes a subtle practice that you start building, right? And I always tell folks, I don't care if you write down a single sentence, just write down one sentence. Today, I feel very frustrated. That's it.
Yeah.
That's where it starts. Maybe you get to a point where you start writing paragraphs. Maybe you get to a point where you start writing pages. Maybe you don't. But as long that's not the goal. The goal is just to take those emotions, get them out of your system, learn how to sit in them, learn how to feel them, learn how to understand them, and then that will kind of help resolve some of the anxiety, quote unquote. Um, but at the same time, it's like there's never going to be no more anxiety, or like you're going to get to a point of zero anxiety. It's always going to be there. What you're doing is you're getting better at handling those uncomfortable feelings. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah,
Does
yeah,
that
absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like what is it about the journaling process? Because I've journaled in the past, and then now I had to use checklists and stuff like that because it keeps my life a little bit more organized. But what
Mhm.
is it about those things that people just won't do? Because I feel like a lot of people are like journaling, like that's stupid, like that's dumb. Writing out your goals for the day, that's stupid. Your checklist, that's stupid. I'm just gonna go out
Mhm.
and do what I do. Like, what is it about that? What is that brain block that people cannot get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think our brains are hardwired to maintain our survival and our comfort. So a lot of times, working on yourself, making lifestyle changes in the gym, working through emotions, it's very difficult and it's very painful. A lot of times, you start uncovering things you didn't quite realize were there, and it can have like altering effects on how you view yourself or other people, and that it's very uncomfortable. And if somebody's like maybe a little bit unaware of the gravity of the situation, like why would they want to do that, right? Unless somebody, maybe their clinician kind of starts pointing it out, like, hey, like this really all seems to be connected, right? And that's that's kind of one of the realizations that I've started to have recently. And it's been kind of, I'm getting a little bit better at articulating it, after I went to go see Dr. Jordan Peterson talk. I've been reading Dr. Monte's books and just trying to learn about all this stuff as much as I can. And in my 8 years of practice, like there's so much similarity in everyone's problems that like it seems much deeper rooted than just like, oh, the food here. It seems much deeper rooted than that. And I think there's a big generational thing that has to go deal back to like how we were raised. Um, and everybody was raised a little bit differently, right? And it's like I try to always explain it as like um, everybody's going through the same 5 to 7 different scenarios, but the details are different, right? Like it might be somebody's mom, and so for somebody else it's their dad, and for somebody else it's their brother, and then just all of those little minute details are all different, but the core emotion and the core problems they're relatively all the same,
Hmm.
right? So now when I look at chronic disease, I'm starting to look at all these things. And I'm starting to like, simply just ask people like, hey, what was the relationship like with your mom and dad? What's the relationship like with your husband? What's the relationship like with your coworkers? What's the relationship like with your kids? What are some of the things you do when you get super stressed out? What do you fall back on? And learning those things about people has allowed us to like one connect deeper. Two, I see them actually as actual human beings, not just diagnoses. And we start working there to have the positive impact on the food, the nutrition, the diet, the lifestyle, the exercise, and all those types of things. Um, and I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but that's been my soapbox lately.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's an interesting thing. At what point do people get to that like aha moment? Say, oh, okay, let me actually start listening to you.
It's different for everybody, and sometimes it takes a while. But it's in terms of like from my own perspective and in my own experience, when I was working with the bigger private practices, when I first started out, and even with the corporate practices that I was at, there wasn't a lot of time to ask those questions. It was like, what's your sugar? What's your blood pressure? Are these really your meds? Are you taking them? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, look, your blood pressure a little high today. You still need your mammogram. And then we're going to go up on your depression meds because you told me you're feeling a little bit sad. Right. And like you just have to boom, 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 boom through all that because you have 10, 15 minutes versus
Yeah.
now like just asking those questions, and a lot of times it's just for some folks I might see them once every 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and each time it's just like let's ask these tough questions, let's ask these tough questions until finally they break through, or they break down and they share, right? And some people come in and it's the first time that I've ever met this person, and they just lay it all out. right? They're just like they're crying, they're letting it all out, and a lot of times we get the compliment of like we just feel like we can be open here, and a lot of times people do feel more comfortable talking to their clinician than to their own family members, and just kind of get into those environments like it's different for everybody. But I think kind of going back to the actual question, it's like it really just takes as long as it needs to for somebody to come into their lives and ask the right questions that gets them to let down their guard.
Yeah, because I would even say at some point, like when they hit rock bottom, like they still keep doing the exact same things over and over and over again. So it is a deep rooted thing, and I think a lot of it stems from the basic thing of just fear. Like they're fearful of what is going to happen if they're not this way for a prolonged way. But I talk about this all the time. Is like during COVID times, I was drinking heavily. I was eating everything. I got to my heaviest and all that stuff. And that was, I see back now as depression. Like I was just going through a depressive state. And that's because I had my kids, I had my dog, I had my family, I had my life, right? And I was still going to work and doing everything. I was a social, I was a, what was it called? A functional, I was functional depressive, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I see it now looking back, it's like, okay, and I still kept doing it and doing it and doing it over and over and over again. And it was just fear because I didn't know what was going to happen in the future. And I think I came to this point in my life, it's like, I don't know anything that's going to happen in the future. Like, I don't know what's going to happen when I leave my studio today. Like, I
Hmm.
think a lot of us try to control as much as we possibly can, but a lot of it you can't control. Like, I live in
Hmm.
that fear every single day. And that always asks me is like, when I think about these things, is I always talk about you are a product of your environment. Is there any truth to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't understand how, and I'm open to being corrected here, but I don't understand how you could not be a product of your environment.
Yeah, it's because people, when I say that, people push back. It's like, well, I'm not a product of my environment. I got out. I was like, yeah, but you got out because of the environment. You were a product of that
Exactly.
environment. So it's like, I always get the pushback. I just don't think they realize that that product, that environment molded them to who they are now since they became a product of that environment. So I kind of just want to, touch on that subject because it is a very interesting topic. And I always get pushbacks like, no, I'm not a product of my environment. It's like, yes, you are.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll take it a little bit deeper. Like, um, there's always an environment, right? No matter what you talk about, there's an environment, right? It could be the jungle, it could be a city, it could be the farm, or it could be the workplace. There's always an environment, and then it's either you seclude into the environment if it's something that you enjoy, or if it's something that you don't enjoy but feels too overwhelming that you can't battle it, right? And still having an effect on you. Or if it's a bad environment and like, you know what, I don't want my life to be this way. I'm going to get out. Like it's molding you, right? It's just how you're reacting to the environment. And even so much to the point where like, um, this is kind of getting on another soapbox, but a lot of people deal with pain, physical pain, and chronic pain is a real big problem in the country. And a lot of times the traditional viewpoint is like if you have back pain, there's problems in your back, and that's it. And we're talking about back pain that's been present for 3 months or more. We're talking about chronic back pain, not, oh, I pulled my back 4 weeks ago, but I'm better now. So for the folks who have chronic back pain, neck pain, those are two common ones. The chronic pain should be viewed from three lenses. And one of those lenses is physical, right? Like what is going on in the neck? Are there tight muscles? Are there trigger points? Is there disc herniations? Is there arthritis? Those types of things. And then the other part is the mental emotional viewpoint, right? Is there depression? Is there anxiety? Is there chronic stress, right? And then there's the environment, like what type of environment are you in? What is your work environment like? What is your family environment like? Do those environments support you or pull you down? Right? And the reason that I say that it should be those three viewpoints is because there's two core examples. It's like phantom pain, which is when you amputate a body part, or you feel pain on an amputated body part, right? So if you don't have your leg anymore, people still feel foot pain, right? How do you feel
Yeah.
foot pain if there's no foot and pain is only physical, right?
Yeah.
Because pain is more than just the physical nature of things. And then two, there was another study where they took a couple hundred individuals, and the requirement to be in the study was that you had no back pain at all. You took no meds, you did nothing, right? And they did MRIs on all two, 300 people, and they found that like over half of them had disc herniations and things like that. It's like, well, if those things cause pain, how come these individuals don't feel pain,
Hmm.
right? And then you think about maybe you're going through some pain, right? Maybe you injured something, right? But then you get around like your wife or your family, and you're just having one of those amazing family moments, and for that moment, the pain goes away,
Right.
right? Because you were in a great environment and you were distracted, right? So
Hmm.
environment has a huge role into who we become, how we perceive things, and the type of um, character traits we develop.
Yeah, that's interesting because I would say 95% of people's lives they're not in a beautiful place where they are stress free stuff like that. So that's
Hmm.
very interesting study that you came across. Wow. Okay. Let's talk about mental health. I
Hmm.
feel I dive down rabbit holes. I use Chat GPT. I create agents, and I can't find mentors. I can't find heroes of mine that I can actually access in person. Right. So I recreated them on AI, and I have a bunch of like 5 different mentors that I chat with every day. And I always feel weird telling people this because it is strange. Like you're going onto a computer, you're asking AI that's you trained in certain with certain people that you admire, and it's giving you feedback and stuff like that. I always feel weird talking about that, but I don't know if there are any heroes or role models out there that you can call upon now. Like the internet's full of people, right? Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, right? But then also locally, it's like you kind of lose you kind of lose touch with people and their human sides, right? So you always want people to be positive and stuff like that, but that's just not the way life is, right? So you get people that just tell you this is how it is, these are steps you need to do, this is good advice, this is insight. So I feel like a lot of the mental health issues right now stem from a lot of people that just don't have people to look up to. They don't have heroes. They don't have any guidance. Men and women across, they just really don't know what to do in life. A lot of them are lost. What do you see on your end?
I do kind of agree with the sentiment there. I think that it almost seems like a generation of people that came up being told and sold that corporate success was the key to happiness is realizing that it's really not,
Mhm.
right? And within that storm, there's not a great understanding of mental health in general. There are thought leaders out there, right? Dr. Mate, Dr. Nicola Pera, and there are other individuals who are trying to take all that information and apply it to their communities, but it's not near enough to keep up with the amount of people who are you know struggling behind closed doors. And for anybody who's watching this, and maybe you're not one of those individuals struggling behind closed doors, like bravo, I'm very happy for you, but reality is like there is a lot, right? And I feel like I have some like real anecdotal experience behind that, because I do have these conversations with a lot of our patients. Like just 2 months ago, there was a gentleman coming in. We were supposed to do a 3-month follow up on his diabetes, and like we didn't even talk about the diabetes. Like we talked about the fact that he just lost his brother and he was having a hard time processing that, right? And so like, why am I going to talk to him about staying away from fast food and not drinking sodas if he's doing that because he's sad?
Right.
Right, let's talk about the sadness and let's learn how to process that, right? And there's like the stages of grief and all that kind of stuff. And I just think that like we're missing the mark on those particular topics. And I think it's showing up in like the higher rates of depression and anxiety. I mean, there is a little bit of maybe overdiagnosing as well, but a lot of people are going through a lot of mental struggles. We're seeing it in the teens, right? We're seeing higher rates of suicidal ideation in female teenagers, actually, which is scary. I'm sure for you hearing that, as you have a daughter, I have a daughter, so that those types of things are important to me, and kind of I didn't even expect to go down this like path in life. But when I was gonna have our first child, our little girl, I was like, I'm gonna go to therapy just to make sure I'm good. Like, and I
Yeah.
expected just like, hey, you're good, Mike. All right, cool, ready to have a baby. But no, that was my first step into the abyss of discovering everything that I was to discover about myself. And it was a very painful 2 years. But then I was like, if I'm going through this, I'm sure there are a lot of other people going through this as well. And so I've
Yeah.
been kind of going down that, like trying to learn about and be able to articulate those types of ideas and have them kind of take the trickle down effect into improving blood pressure, diabetes, pain, all those types of things.
It's an interesting life because obviously there is no manual to any of this stuff, right? I remember talking to my mom. I think I was like in my 30s or something. I looked when I had my kids. I was like, "Mom, I'm sorry. I get it now. It's like, I understand."
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I went through that moment too. I was like, oh, my parents were right.
it's an interesting thing. Let's talk about the stages of grief because this is a very interesting topic. Like I don't think people. I think people just push stuff down, push it down, push it down, push it down.
Mhm.
Obviously, on social media, you see a lot of people that are passing away. A lot of people are posting stuff about their friend passing away, and I don't know if this always been like that or just because social media is here, like it's more pronounced, right? But I feel like I see something every single day about somebody passing away, somebody uh, going away, right? And I feel like people don't know how to grieve. I feel like, sir, and this is one of the hardest truths I had to swallow, right? Because I talked to my buddy Rob, this is studio partner here, and he's like, the truth is, the dead go into the ground and the living go back to work. And I was like, ooh, that's harsh. Like I was
Mhm.
kind of upset hearing that, but the truth and the reality is, in the world that we live in here in America, that is the case because tomorrow you still have to go to work. Like you still have to perform, right? So let's talk about the stages of grief because I feel like a lot of people don't know how to grieve.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that whole like dead people going to the ground and those that are alive go back to work is like a a great summary of just like we're not processing it, right? We don't have the time. We're not given the freedom to process that stuff, right? And so the stages of grief, those, and I'm referring to, I think it's the Kubler-Ross model. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And and generally, the accepted timeline here is that it should take about 6 months or up to 6 months to go through this process. But I've seen it take longer. I've seen it take shorter. And first stage is denial. What's like you struggle to accept the loss, like why, and all that kind of stuff. And then as you start to sort of somewhat accept it, or at least you move past the denial, you become angry. Like why would, for those that are religious, why would God take him or her away from me? And why didn't I um um do this, or why didn't I do that? You get that self anger, which then leads into the bargaining, which is where you try to like negotiate or make deals with a higher power or even themselves to kind of lessen the impact and the difficulty of the loss. Um, Once you get past that, that's when the sadness actually sets in and the reality of the loss is like fully realized. Which that's usually where people start to feel empty, hopeless. And this is the part of the grieving process where they'll get um, um, diagnosed as being depressed or anxious. And it's like, you're just grieving. You're not depressed. You're not anxious. You're just grieving, right? This is normal, right? I've seen that. I'll never forget. I had a 78-year-old woman, maybe a little bit older. She lost her husband of 40 years, right? And I saw her every month, just kind of walking her through this process because she needed it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? We didn't use any medications, and thankfully today she's living a great life with the family she has left. But the traditional thing would have been to like give her a medication, be like done with it, right?
right.
But once you move past that the depression phase of it, and it's labeled as depression, but we can use the words like emptiness, hopeless, loneliness, things like that. Then you move on to the final stage, which is acceptance, and that's where you really kind of come to terms with the whole idea of what happened, whatever loss occurred. And I think maybe the easy thing to do there is to feel or to think that, oh, that's when the pain goes away, and that's not what happens. The pain never goes away. It just becomes easier to deal, and you find healthy ways to use that pain, right? And that's not talked about enough. And I see it so much too, where like somebody loses somebody and they come in just 3 days later, like, can I get a pill for depression? Like, I just don't want to go through this, right?
Yeah.
And while I would love to take everybody down this journey, not everybody is ready for it. And
Yeah.
to a certain extent, for me and for people in my situation, in my profession, it's like sometimes you do just have to meet people where they are, and the grieving process could look different for everybody, right? Like getting a depression medication because you lost a family member isn't a bad thing. Maybe you're an individual that needs the depression medication to get through the grieving process, as long as you're going through the grieving process, right? Not just like, I'm going to distract myself and not think about this, right? I'm going to keep busy. I need to do this, I need to do that. And like people get hyper busy to avoid experiencing the feelings, right? Because they're painful feelings. And when that happens and you don't, grieve properly, a lot of times that turns into there's something called prolonged grief disorder, which is commonly diagnosed as depression and anxiety. But it's just like, hey, you had this thing happen, right? Like say, like let's take an adult who loses a child and then is depressed 15 years later, but nobody ever asks them what that was like.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
And then it can manifest as simple depression and anxiety in the future. But then the chronic, and this is where we have I don't think we have a full understanding of stress, but not processing those in moments like that leads to um, chronic stress from the unresolved grief because you're always battling it. It just becomes so routine for you, and that can weaken the immune system. That can lead to different types of conditions, that can lead to autoimmune disorders, sleep disorders, heart disorders, digestive problems. It can lead to substance abuse. It can lead to strains on a relationship because maybe there's a particular aspect of a relationship that triggers all those old feelings from the unresolved grief, and now the relationship has gone to doo doo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then even when you start viewing things or looking at life from that perspective and from that lens, maybe that will lead to like impaired decision making or impaired functioning, right? And then you drop down from society standards, right? Um, so that's why I think it's so important to like actually grieve and like work with people through the grieving process. But you need time to do that.
Right. Yeah, I think we live in a society where they want instant gratification. Like I don't care. I just want this today now. I don't care about anything else. I'm going through this. This is what I'm going through. I only care about myself. I want it now.
Yeah, and men are some of the biggest culprits of this because it's like, hey, like I got a family to provide for, like I don't got time. I got to do this, right? But and short term, there's they'll get the benefit of being able to push through the whole thing, but then long term, they might have some relationship problems with their kids, or they might have some relationship problems with their parents, and other people in their life, and it just really spills over. It really spills over, and that's I think like just about everything can probably be tied back to some 2 to 3, maybe 5 core events that happened to you in your lifetime.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would argue that some of the people don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
That's that's
yeah, I
that's,
totally
that's
agree.
a crazy part.
Totally agree, and like, the I see that, right? Because there's some people that I talk to, and I'm like, I can dive into this stuff, and there's some people like, we gotta get them there, 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 and I know them for 2 years, and it's like, "All right, let's dive. We're ready." Right?
Yeah,
And so for some folks, we never get there, unfortunately, and it might just be that maybe I'm not the person for them, and they're not the person for me, but hopefully somebody else, serves that role for them in their future.
yeah. What do you think about AI? I was listening to. I've been diving heavy into it, and it says there since AI exponentially grows, they're saying that at least within the next 5 to 10 years, if you can live that long, you will probably live to the age of 200 to 300 years old. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I've never heard that. That would be interesting. Um, um, I guess knee-jerk thought would be like, I don't know if the body could survive for that long. Um,
Well, the advancements that they're talking about is like the cellular rejuvenation. So you'll be able to live that old that age 200 300 years old with
mhm,
the body that I have now, like 40-year-old body. Right? You're still able to get out of bed with some vitality. You won't look old, like like older people do. So,
mm,
and my thought is like, do you want to live that long? Like, what would life be living for
yeah,
200 300 years? Like
yeah,
those are the thoughts that I says. I get like why people would want to die. Move on to the next thing, right? You served your
mhm,
purpose here, but I do question myself. It's like, would I want to live 200 to 300 years and see where the future goes? Because you think about it, like like the past 100 years, we've grown so much. Like 100 years ago, we didn't have vehicles. Like now we
Hmm.
have robots, AI coming out. It's like
Yeah.
it's a very weird world that we're going towards, and it's happening fast. So I
Yeah.
question myself, like, would I even be able to like comprehend what's going on in the future? Because my grandpa's on Facebook, right? So he types every now and then. Is like he's 95, but like the older generation wants nothing to do with technology. Like they're not willing to learn it. They don't want to deal with it. So I was like, will I be at that point too, or will I be able to get like the Neuralink just popped into my head and boom, upload?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think definitely a question of like, just because we can, does it mean
Should
that
we?
we should? Right. Yeah. That would be really interesting. I think my mindset on this might be a little bit altered because I'm like, man, 200 to 300 years of like unresolved trauma and mental health, like that doesn't sound healthy. But I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that'd be interesting to see. If the and then the kid inside me is like, if that meant that I could get to see flying cars at some point, like I would do it. Like
Yeah,
I want to see the flying cars. I've been waiting for that. Um, on that Back to the Future vibe. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that statement before. I really that's kind of that one kind of got me. I'm not sure I have like a full formed thought on that, but
yeah, it's
what
interesting.
do you think about it?
I think we're right now on October 10th. Yeah, Elon Musk is about to announce the robo taxis, right? And he also has a bot called Optimus. So this bot is already moving. It can touch, like it can fold towels and stuff like that. So it's gonna be, I think he said there will be one for every 10 people in the world. So these are gonna
Mm,
be like pushed out at the mass. Like they're gonna be affordable. I think he said they're gonna be like 70 grand at some point, and they're just gonna drop down lower and lower and lower, and eventually it'll be like 10 grand. So you'll have one robot for every 10 human beings in the world, probably within the next 20 years. And you think
mm,
about that, it's like does that help with the quality of life with the aging population that's here? Because the aging population is starting to die off, but there's a ton of them, like Medicare and all that stuff, medical, everything like that is geared towards the older demographic. So will this help the quality of your life for the older demographic? Like those are the thoughts that I think
mm.
about a lot because yeah, robots are going to help. They're like going to be 100 pounds. I can carry it up here to my studio to help me do all these things. Will it add to the quality of your life? Will your life be better? What do you think about that?
I think that might depend on what generation of individual you're talking to or what decade of life they're in. Because I could see it being completely useful for me and you. Um,
Yeah,
but I think of like myself at 75 or 80 if I'm blessed to live that long. And I can easily see myself getting to a point where maybe my physical health is has taken a hit, and folding my clothes and doing my own laundry is something that I find satisfaction, joy, and pride in, and don't want anybody doing that for me, right? So
yeah,
but then on the other side of that is like, well, if I get to a point where I can't do that at all, it's nice to have the robot there doing it for me, right? And
yeah,
what I see a lot for the elderly that become, very ill, and usually there's a family member taking care of them, whether it be a wife, a husband, a daughter, son, whatever it may be. There's this thing called provider role strain, and the people that are acting as the provider for the sick individual, they do become very strained. Like it's a big impact on their lives, on their health, and so on. And if a robot could help mitigate that, I could see some benefit there if the older individual is accepting and in a position where it makes sense.
yeah.
Um, that's really the first thought that comes to mind in that scenario.
Now you touched on something about providers. One of my buddies, his mom has dementia, early sets of dementia, right? And
Mhm.
I saw like the toll that it's taking them. So I started diving into it. I started researching. I was like, there's a fuckload of people that are dealing with that. Like it's kind of mind boggling to me. Is like it's kind of one of those things. If you don't hear about it, it's kind of swept under the rug. Nobody ever talks about it, stuff like that. But I can physically see and emotionally see like the strain that it's having on him and his wife, like, so can you kind of touch on that? Because I don't think people really understand like the gravity of that situation, like dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I think That and strokes that leave people paralyzed, that is probably one of the toughest things to see. And um, I've had the joy and frustration of seeing people go through that. It's the joy comes from helping them through that, but it's frustrating because you can see how much it impacts them. Um, the it's really difficult to put into words watching somebody that loves somebody not even remember who they are, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've there's been moments where I've shed tears just because of like how much like the emotion and pain you see on the like the provider's face, right? Taking care of the person who has dementia. Um, so it's probably one of the hardest things anybody would ever have to do, right? Um, and in terms of like dementia in general, like I think it's one of those things where like I mean, there's nothing we can do to reverse it. We don't have anything to reverse it or even improve it. All we do is we can slow its rate. That's the only thing we can do. And a lot of times, um, I think a lot. I think if everybody's honest, a lot of times you're noticing some of these changes, but you're not saying it because it's subtle enough that you see it, but also you don't want to offend the person, right?
What
When you
what
start
would
having
be
like,
what would be that like what would you say that those signs are?
uh, just like a decline in the ability to solve simple math problems, um ability to keep up with technology is, and then I say that with a grain of salt because there's a particular moment where that starts to happen. Not that like, oh, somebody like just doesn't like technology. No, it doesn't mean you're going through cognitive changes, but you can start see where like society starts to become a little bit harder, and that's what we would call like mild cognitive decline. And a lot of times that's there well um before dementia even sets in, and those are moments that you can intervene and start putting things into play in order to delay the actual onset of the the dementia itself. And I guess to give you like a little bit more thorough of an answer in terms of like the mild cognitive decline and what that might look like, you would see memory loss. You would forget a lot of recent events, forgetting appointments, and needing more effort to recall information, difficulty solving problems that you typically can solve, maybe like high functioning, complex, like financial problems that become a little bit more difficult, um, a little bit more difficult to stay focused, a little bit more difficult to maintain concentration, follow conversations. Maybe you start noticing they're having trouble finding words to use that they typically are pretty sharp with, you know. Um, Visual spatial challenges could be another one. You might start seeing falls kind of go up a little bit, and that's because they're having a difficult time judging distance, judging balance. Um, Even recognizing common objects. And then the other one is problems with like executive function, which is like the organizing, the multitasking, managing finances, things like that. Those are some of those signs of like mild cognitive decline, which comes before dementia sets in.
Interesting. So how do you slow it down?
From a slowing it down is like all the medications we have for dementia, all they do is slow it down. But then from a more holistic standpoint, anything that gets more blood to the brain, right? Exercise would be number one. It's actually a great segue into one of my favorite things to teach people is that, a lot of times you see people doing crossword puzzles or they're working the Rubik's Cube or they're doing all those kind of like mind games and brain games. Those were getting really popular for a minute. And a lot of time was like, keep your mind strong and prevent dementia and all that kind of stuff. And when they actually did the studies, none of those things actually had any effect on the diagnosis rate of dementia. The only
Hmm.
thing that has been shown to actually prevent and delay dementia is exercise.
Wow.
That's it. Nothing else.
Wow. Interesting. Interesting. And
Well,
I would
let
also
me
argue that. I'm sorry.
let me correct myself. So there is one other thing, and that would be avoiding diabetes, right? And so there are some circles that are calling dementia type 3 diabetes. But if you really like the way I have perceived that is like, well, diabetes inhibits blood flow and it would inhibit blood flow to the brain. So again, back to the same thing about just making sure we get good blood flow to the brain.
So is it fair to say that if you have diabetes, you'll probably get dementia, Alzheimer's?
Um, I'm gonna say no. Would it increase your risk? Probably, but then to what degree, right? Like, and when it comes to risk, there's relative risk and there's absolute risk, and this is where a lot of people typically um, don't know this. Where like you'll see it on the pharmaceutical commercial, 2 times improvement in blood flow because of this medication, and it's like that 2 times improvement it was because it went from 0.5% to 1%, but we're still missing the other 99%, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds better to say 2 times, right? Or
Mm.
200% improvement, right? And so, like, if for somebody, for individuals with diabetes, like maybe, like, let's just say, I don't know what these numbers are, but this is how it would play out. And we could probably like look this up at some point. But like, let's say that the average risk, right, just because you're human, to be diagnosed with dementia is 1.5%, right? And then if you're diabetic, now that's 3%, right? And so like being diabetic doubled your chances of getting diagnosed with dementia, but it's still only a 3% chance, which means that
Right.
the vast majority of people that have diabetes won't ever get diagnosed with dementia.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Before we finish off the podcast or Valley Vibes, I've come across this saying: "The fountain of youth is found in diet and exercise." Is there truth to that?
There is truth to that. Yes. I would say it's probably missing out on something related to stress. Something related to stress. I
Keep
think
going.
that.
Keep going.
Yeah, I think we underestimate the impact that stress has on our health. I think we underestimate the impact that stress has on aging. And it's almost like, if you go to the places in the world where they are the happiest and the healthiest, their society looks nothing like ours.
Hmm.
You know, and which or presents a very difficult problem for you and for me, because how do we strive towards that? How do we manage our stress living in this society, which has plenty of advantages? I'm not saying that it sucks to live here,
Right.
but it does have its trade-offs, right? And the a lot of times it's because we have deemed certain things admirable. If we had different things deemed as admirable, then you could shape your life to that. And I think that's also why a lot of people can quote unquote feel lost in today's world, because they have a hard time finding what their true passions are and what they want their life to be. And they're trying to get advice from people who don't necessarily share the same vision for themselves. But it's still healthy to learn about all these things, take it and then apply it to your life. But ultimately you have to be that decision maker. And I think that could help mitigate stress, and stress, if we keep our stress in check. And just a quick caveat that zero stress is not the goal. We want stress. We just don't want high levels for a long time. If you eat well, if you can exercise, if you can keep your stress down and sleep well, then that's a recipe for having the best chance of aging gracefully, right? Where
Yeah.
you are 70 years old taking hikes, where you're 75 and you're still able to lift your suitcase into the overhead bin on the airplane. You know,
Yeah.
that's what we all envision ourselves as aging like, but we need to do things now to make sure that we get there, right? And it's like the way that I like to put it is like the best way to take care of your 75-year-old self is to start today,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
all of that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's an interesting thing. And one more before we finish off, hydration. So where I work out at, and I've stumbled upon this, is that a lot of the kids too, they have no clue about what hydration is. I'll say like
Mhm,
so many people are dehydrated, and they can fix a lot of their problems just by hydration. Can you kind of
mhm.
touch on that? Because I think it's mind-boggling to me. Is like I mean I only learned this in the past 2 years, right? So I
Yeah,
get it, but it
yeah.
is mind-boggling because I've always drank water. Like I've always drank it, and I drink a lot of it. But it's mind-boggling to me that people just don't know what hydration is.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many options for beverages now that water doesn't really seem to be that desirable. And then you got, all the cool marketing for the younger kids with all the new juice packs and all that kind of stuff. it's easy, right? And we kind of we lose we lose the importance of good old fashioned H2O. And I think I used to know this, but and I'm trying to dig back. I think the statistic is that 80% of people are dehydrated, or
Wow.
90%. It's super high like that, and it goes beyond just like not drinking water. It's like how many people start their day with coffee, right? Coffee's a diuretic, so you're losing water. It's like water in and water out. You're not drinking the water, but then you're also expelling more water because you're drinking sodas and coffees and teas and all that stuff. And not only that, but then we live, like the what's like 8 ounce glasses of water is the recommendation. Like I'm pretty sure that recommendation came from some northern state. Like it didn't come from studying it in the valley where it's
Yeah,
super
with
humid,
yeah,
right? You're sweating more, you're breathing more, all that stuff. So like you're constantly losing water, and when you talk, you're losing water when you're outside, you're losing water when you sweat, when you're urinating, all those types of things. And then all those moments, and then you're not drinking water. It's like, so we got to there's multiple aspects to it. But yeah, chronic dehydration, a common contributor to fatigue, to headaches, migraine headaches, and or a reduced ability to handle stress. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those core things. And you think about like we are 75% water, but then we're not drinking water,
yeah.
and it becomes such a challenge. Like I love those memes, or yeah, the memes where they're like 8 glasses of water, difficult. 8 glasses of wine, like that.
Yeah, like
you know
that. That's true. So if y'all are listening, you're watching this, just drink some damn water, man. It'll fix a lot of your
yes,
problems.
yes, and reduce the caffeine. I promise it'll help.
Well, Michael Menchaca, thank you very much. Pitch your amenity director one more time before we finish off.
Yeah, so I'm the owner of Amenity Direct Care. We have locations in Harlingen and Westlaco, and we are a membership model based clinic. Membership gives you unlimited visits at no copays, unlimited telehealth. You get your clinician's direct phone number, direct email, so you can reach out to them directly. We have the cheapest labs you'll find. It's cheaper than Mexico. I mean, checking your A1C for diabetes with us costs $2.75. All the procedures we do in house, from like stitches, cysts, abscesses, injections, flu testing, COVID testing, strep testing, all that's included in the membership price. Um, you also have access to virtual specialists at no extra charge. And because it's a membership model, we actually start at your appointment time, and there's nobody ever waiting in our lobbies. And we actually design it so that when you do come in for your appointment, we try to make it so that you're the only person there, so that you get 100% of our attention. And we're not worried about 20 people in the lobby and 5 more people in other rooms. And it's been a really great experience bringing that to the Valley. It's still a very rare model for the country. And yeah, if you want to check us out, amenitydpc.com. On Facebook, we're Amenity Direct Care. On Instagram, we're Amenity Direct. And if you want to text me, here's my number. It's 956-446-0955. That'll come straight to me. If you want to have a conversation about any of this, or you're interested in membership, whatever, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. You were in Westlaco and Harlingen, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And we'll see. Maybe
Awesome.
the Upper Valley one day. We'll see.
Awesome. Mike, I appreciate your time and your insight. We'll talk soon, man.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Have a good day.
Bye bye.